Hello, Shay. Welcome. Hello, Disciple One. This is a name I'm not familiar with, or do I know you as a different name outside of YouTube? Ah, all right. Welcome. How did you find me or the channel? If you don't mind me asking, I always like to find out how people come to the channel. Welcome to those who are joining. We'll get started in a few minutes. Feel free to say hello in the chat. Hello, Karuna. Welcome. Ah, really interesting, Disciple. Well, that's interesting. Hmm. We'll get started in a minute or two. Let's see. Hello, Gregory. Hello, Maria. All right, it's time. So let's get started. Share screen. We'll do Karaniya Metta Sutta today. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Karaniya matta kusulena yang tang santang padanga besamecha sako uju cha suju cha suvacho cha samudu anatimani santus sako cha subaro cha appakitcho cha sallahu kavutti santindriyo cha nepako cha appagabbo kuleso nanugiddo Nachakudang samachere kinshiyena venyu pareyu pavadeyung sukino va ke meno hontu sabbe satta bhavantu sukitatta ye kechipanna buddhati tasava tavarava anavasesa dikava ye mahantava majjima rasika nukatula Titava yeva ditta ye chodore vasante avidore bhuttava sambhave siva sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta naparo parang nekubetta nyatimanyeta katachinang kanchi vyarosana patigasanya nanyamanyassa dukkamicheya Mata yata niyang puttang ayusa ekaputtang anurakke Evang pisabbabutesu manasang bhavayeya parimanang Mettang cha sabbalo kasming manasang bhavayeya parimanang Uranga roja tiriyancha sambadang averang asapattang Titang charang nisinova sayanova yavatassa vegetamiddo etang sating aditteya brahma metang viharang idamahu ditincha nupagamma silava dassanena sampanno kame suvaneya gedang nahijatu gambassayang punareti iti etena satchavajena sottime hottu sabbada. All right, English. Discourse on loving friendliness. One skilled in good, wishing to attain that state of peace, should act thus. One should be able, straight, upright, obedient, gentle, and humble. One should be content, easy to support, with few duties, living lightly, controlled in senses, discreet, not impudent, unattached to families. One should not do any slight wrong which the wise might censure. May all beings be happy and secure. May all beings have happy minds. Whatever living beings there may be, without exception, weak or strong, long or large, medium, short, subtle or gross, visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth, may all beings have happy minds. Let no one deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere. Neither from anger nor ill will should anyone wish harm to another. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so towards all living beings one should cultivate a boundless heart. One should cultivate for all the world a heart of boundless loving friendliness, above, below, and all around, unobstructed, without hatred or resentment. Whether standing, walking, or sitting, lying down, or whenever awake, one should develop this mindfulness. This is called divinely dwelling here. Not falling into erroneous views, but virtuous and endowed with vision, removing desire for sensual pleasures, one comes never again to birth in the womb. By the power of this truth, may I always have well-being. All right, friends, it is Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, and that means it is time for the Festival of Dhamma with the Maggasekha community. It's time for Dhammapalooza. Dhammapalooza contains a variety of different Dhamma-related activities. We did some chanting, and who knows what will come for the rest of the time that we're doing our session today. As you know, this Dhammapalooza is always community guided. That means that sometimes there's just a lot of questions. Sometimes there's no questions and we just read suttas. Sometimes we play little sutta games like sutta or word roulette. And we try to just do a bunch of Dhamma related activities and see where it goes. So for the next couple of minutes in the chat, if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, you can put them in the chat. If you have any topics you'd like me to give a talk on, you can put that in the chat. If you have any topics you'd like the community to discuss, you can put that in the chat. And if nobody has anything, well, there's always a sutta in the back pocket or one of the sutta games we can play. Sure, type in your question, disciple. Did I say hello to Gregory? I think I did. Hello, Gregory and Maria. Yeah. We supposedly have 12 people on here. Say hello, especially if it's your first time. Ah, hello, Gretchen. Good to see you. So this is from what we just chanted in the Karanimetta Suttas. One should not do any slight wrong which the wise might censure. And the idea here is that regardless of a person is wrong or right or whatever, the idea is for you not to perform an act. Right? For you not to do anything which wise people might not think is a wise, good, skillful thing to do. So just because you designate somebody a wrong person doesn't mean that that justifies you to do wrong or bad to them, because of them, whatever. Right? Your karma is always your own. Nobody else, takes on the results of your karma. So regardless of how other people are, the Buddha wants us to train so that we would not do any slight wrong the wise might censure. Meaning wise people might say this is not a good thing, and they might admonish you for doing it. So that's what this means in the chanting that we just did. Looks like the chat is quiet. So why don't we then play we'll play some word roulette. Last week we did Vinaya, Vinaya by the numbers. So we'll do the suttas this time. Oh, actually, depending on the word, we can do both Vinaya and sutta. So. Hello, Sky. All right, let's see who's actually here. We supposedly have 14 people. Let's see. The chat is quiet. Let's see if who's here. In 3, 2, 1, type one word that comes to your mind. Obviously, not a bad word. not a censorious word. Just type. It could be a random word. And then we will look what suttas arise. Hello, Christian. Welcome. Hello, Wasabi. Oh, Shay. Anicca's too on the nose. just like a random kind of English word that you might find that might come up something, an interesting sutta. Yeah, these kind of games I did not do back when you were around. Yeah, back then, Dhammapalooza and the stuff I did was a bit more straightforward. But the different kind of games that we do, the sutta games, is something that I developed. All right. All right, well, Christian, so to relieve some stress, just pick a random word. Let's see what comes up in the suttas. Let's have some fun. All right, so we have fear. That's an easy one. I know what's going to come up from that. Definitely Majjhima Nikaya 4 for the first. Well, let's see. Ooh. Let's see. Let's read Fearless. Anguttara Nikaya 4.184. Then the Brahmin Janusoni went up to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to the Buddha, Master Gautama, this is my doctrine and view. All those liable to death are frightened and terrified of death. Brahmin, some of those liable to death are frightened and terrified of death. But some of those liable to death are not frightened and terrified of death. Who are those frightened of death? It's someone who isn't free of greed, desire, fondness, thirst, passion, and craving for sensual pleasures. When they fall seriously ill, they think, the sensual pleasures I love so much will leave me, and I'll leave them. They sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. This is someone who is frightened of death. Furthermore, if someone who isn't free of greed, desire, fondness, thirst, passion, and craving for the body, when they fall seriously ill, they think, this body that I love so much will leave me and I'll leave it. They sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breasts and falling into confusion. This too is someone who is frightened of death. I quite like this sutta. I'm going to have to save this one. Furthermore, it's someone who hasn't done good and skillful things that keep them safe, but has done bad, violent, and depraved things. When they fall seriously ill, they think, well, I haven't done good and skillful things that keep me safe, and I have done bad, violent, and criminal things. When I depart, I'll go to the place where people who've done such things go. They sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. This too is someone who is frightened of death. Furthermore, it's someone who is doubtful, uncertain, and undecided about the true teaching. When they fall seriously ill, they think, I'm doubtful, uncertain, and undecided about the true teaching. They sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. This too is someone who is frightened of death. These are the four people liable to death who are frightened and terrified of death. Who are those not frightened of death? It's someone who is rid of greed, desire, fondness, thirst, passion, and craving for sensual pleasures. When they fall seriously ill, they don't think, the sensual pleasures that I love so much will leave me and I'll leave them. They don't sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breasts and falling into confusion. This is someone who's not frightened of death. Furthermore, it's someone who is rid of greed, desire, fondness, thirst, passion, and craving for the body. When they fall seriously ill, they don't think, this body that I love so much will leave me and I'll leave it. They don't sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breasts and falling into confusion. This too is someone who's not frightened of death. Furthermore, it's someone who hasn't done bad, violent, or corrupt deeds, but has done good and skillful deeds that keep them safe. When they fall seriously ill, they think, well, I haven't done bad, violent, and criminal things, and I have done good and skillful deeds that keep me safe. When I depart, I'll go to the place where people who've done such things go. They don't sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. This too is someone who's not frightened of death. Furthermore, it's someone who is not doubtful, uncertain, or undecided about the true teaching. When they fall seriously ill, they think, I'm not doubtful, uncertain, or undecided about the true teaching. They don't sorrow, wail, and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. This too is someone who's not frightened of death. These are the 4 people liable to death who are not frightened and terrified of death. Excellent Master Gotama, from this day forth, may Master Gotama remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life. Yeah, that was a good one. I liked that. Let's see. One might wish. At one time the Buddha was staying near Savatthi and Jeta's Grove in Attapindika's monastery. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, venerable sir, they replied. The Buddha said this. Hello, Ronald. Welcome. Good to see you. Mendicants live by the ethical precepts of monastic code. Live restrained in the monastic code, conducting yourself well and seeking alms in suitable places. Seeing danger in the slightest fault, keep the rules you've undertaken. A mendicant might wish, may I be liked and approved by my spiritual companions, respected and admired, so let them fulfill their precepts. Be committed to inner serenity of the heart, not neglect jhana, be endowed with discernment and frequent empty huts. Let's see, let me get to the fear part here. A mendicant might wish, may I prevail over fear and dread, and may fear and dread not prevail over me. May I live mastering fear and dread whenever they arise, so let them fulfill their precepts. All right. So let's move on to the next word. I think that's good enough for that. What did we have after fear? Overwhelm. There we go. There's a sutta called Overwhelm, but that is not in the suttas. I don't know what that's from. Avasurutra. I have no idea what that is. Well, let's see. We have from the Anguttara Nikaya, 1099. Let's check this out. Oh, this is a big one. Let me do a. Okay. When they see a sight with their eyes, they don't get caught up in the features and details. If the faculty of sight were left unrestrained, bad unskillful qualities of covetousness and displeasure would become overwhelming. For this reason, they practice restraint, protecting the faculty of sight and achieving restraint over it. So that's a good, this is actually a good word. So basically what this is saying is, if you don't practice restraint, you'll have no power to actually do anything about it. You know, it will be so overwhelming because of your desire, because of your craving, be so overwhelming that it'll be just like, you know, being swept away in a flood. Akamoga, right? Flood of sensuality. So yeah, that's overwhelming. It looks like, yeah, it looks like it's the same, bunch of different suttas, but the same exact thing. So overwhelm is a quick one. So Christian, in the overwhelming and the anxiety, restrain your senses. Put a leash on that anxiety. Don't let it overwhelm you. Recognize it, understand it, investigate it, observe it, and let it go. Wink, huh? Wink. This is an interesting one. Karuna is always good for a random weird word. I don't know how much this is going to come in the suttas. It's definitely in the monastic rules a lot. But I'm interested to see what this is going to be for sutta-wise. Yep, undetermined offense, sitting in private. We even went over this last week. Sitting in a concealed place, sitting in private. Theft. When I wink, it's a sign to steal the goods. Right, so this is considered an act of intention. You don't have to say the words. If you do a fancy word, like whatever. If that means steal or kill or whatever, then a previously agreed upon sign, then it counts because it's part of your intention to do the act. If he says to another person, when I wink, that's a sign to kill that person. All right. Well, Shay, I think I just answered your question. Disciple says content. This is another easy one. There's going to be a bazillion content. Lots of content. Yep, tons of content. Let's see. Let's read this one. Contentment. Mendicants, these 4 trifles are easy to find and are blameless. What for? Rag robes, a lump of alms food, lodgings at the root of a tree, rancid urine as medicine. These 4 trifles are easy to find and are blameless. When a mendicant is content with trifles that are easy to find, they have one of the factors of the ascetic life, I say. When you're content with what is blameless, trifling, and easy to find, you don't get upset about lodgings, robes, food, and drink, and you're not obstructed anywhere. These qualities are said to be integral to the ascetic life. They're mastered by one who trains content and diligent. Yeah, this reminds me, I can talk about this a little bit. This is training yourself to be content with less, so that if you have more, it's okay. I remember I had the first couple of years at Bhavana, I had a bed. I mean, it wasn't a big bed. It was a pretty thin bed. And I had it on, the floor or whatever. And I went to another monastery, Forest Dhamma, and one of the monks who I befriended showed me their kuti, And I was like, well, where do you sleep on? And I go, here it is. And it's like this like little like 1 inch mat that, they put it up during the day. And then when they go to bed, they put it down. And I'm like, oh man, that's badass. Like, I want to do that. So I started doing that. And, and so I basically became used to just being able to sleep on a mat. And I can do that. It's no problem. Even I slept for 3 months in a tent on like a little camping mat. And then I'll go to like a place, like I remember I was invited to teach in North Carolina by the biggest Vipassana, whatever, insight group in North Carolina. And usually when I get invited to go places, I stay in somebody's house, like an old elderly couple whose kids are out of the house. I usually stay in one of their kids' rooms or something like that. Something simple, something simple and kind of nice and wholesome. But this organization, they paid for my flight to come to North Carolina. And they put me up in a hotel, and I thought it was just going to be some rinky-dink hotel. And they put me in like the biggest suite in the fanciest hotel in the city. I'm like, this is Charlotte. I'm not talking about like New York City. It's not like a big major city. And I'm like, why the heck do I need, like, it's like huge. I would have never in lay life paid for such a room. It's just like huge, multiple rooms, and like a huge bed. And I just kind of like, just slept on the floor. It's like, I don't need this, because especially actually if it's too big, I can't breathe. So I actually like firm, but it's just funny because it's like the Buddha talks about in multiple places being content with less. But it says like being content with any robe, with any this, with any that. And what that means is, if you get something, kind of rich and fancy, it's okay. You don't have to feel like, oh, I shouldn't have this, whatever. You just wear what's rich and fancy. That's nice. And if it's just rag robes, then you're also okay, right? So it's equanimous of what you get. Like, this is this is a new robe as of like a couple weeks ago. And it's my 5th or 6th robe in almost 10 years in robes now. And I've had like every different color. So it's not like I want this color, I want that color. It's just, no, I don't even know who gives me the robe. It's just random people, random places. When there's a robe, I get a robe. And that's the robe. And this robe is not as long as I would like it to be or whatever, but you make do. You just figure it out. So this is what the Buddha is saying here. If you're content with less, then if your expectations are low and you're content with less, then you'll be fine. If you get more, well, no problem, good. If you're not content with less, if you have expectations of I need this, I need that, and you don't get it, then that's a recipe for suffering. That is a recipe for suffering. There you go. Taking into account interior factors, mendicants, I do not see a single one that is so very harmful as having many wishes. Right? Having a lack of contentment, that's very harmful. Having many wishes, not good. All right. Or content. Okay, so we're at here, so that I remember. But we do have a question. Karuna is downgrading. Very good, Karuna. You have to work with what there's kind of downgrading and there's punishing yourself, which is different. Like, for instance, even though I can sleep on essentially a yoga mat, I exclusively sleep on my side because I've never in my whole life been able to sleep on my back and breathe. Never. I cannot sleep on my back and breathe. So I sleep on my side. And so even though I kind of, can sleep on a yoga mat, I do need a few pillows so that my head's not all like, like cranked up. So like in the tent, when I spent the 3 months in the tent, I had the little mat, the little blow mattress, just like an inch that you actually blow it up. And then I had a couple pillows, so I was comfortable. I had my sleeping bag for the cold. It worked out well. All right. Shay says, do you usually have to sew your own robes? No. Or they donate it usually pre-made. It's donating pre-made. And some of the Thai forest tradition, it's a tradition at least to sew your first robe. And it's a tradition to kind of, have those skills. The problem is that there's so many robes. Like, it's not an exaggeration to say that any monastery probably has a storeroom of about 40 robes. Because people just give it, like, I remember myself and Bhante Sudaso, when I was first at Bhavana, we were tasked with organizing the monastic stores. And Bhante Sudaso really went out. We like all labeled and nice and things like that. And I said, this is like the monastic, Old Navy or the monastic Gap or whatever. And every monastery I've been to, they each have their own, monastic Old Navy, monastic Gap. There's so many robes. Like, it's an industry in Buddhist countries. So there's just so many robes that, there's really no, you'd have to really go out of your way to say no to a bunch of people. And that's not really, on one hand, it's actually quite nice to have the skill to make your own robe. On the other hand, even in the suttas, the Buddha says, like, if people want to give you robes, you should accept the robes. Like, if people want to, you shouldn't be kind of all like, I don't need it, I'm ascetic. No. Like, if people out of faith want to give you something, you should kind of accept it. You shouldn't just, out of trying to be ascetic, say, no. Because the people are, sincere and honest trying to give you something. This robe that I got, actually, I got this robe the beginning of the year when I was staying with my Indonesian friends in New York. Victor, who's some of you who go to Empty Cloud, you know who Victor is. He wanted to give me, he saw like my robe had some, rips and I had some patches, and he's like, Bhante, you need a new robe. And I'm like, no, I don't need a new robe. I'm good, no problem. But anyway, he got me a new robe, and I was like, you know what, this robe is kind of falling apart. So I'll, keep it here in the stores, maybe until the Katina, and then I'll switch it off. And that's exactly what I did. By the time like June, my robe was falling apart. It was like, when a robe gets to the point where like you have to make a new patch probably every 3 to 4 days, it's time to get a new robe. I mean, the Buddha says that, if you don't have a new robe, you should patch it until it's just nothing but patches, right? But if somebody wants to give you a new robe, you say, okay, I'll accept a new robe. So, well, when my very first robe started getting patches, I was like, yes, I'm becoming an ascetic robe where this is great. After years and years of reading in the suttas, a patchwork robe where I was like, yes, because that's what the Buddha says, encourages us to be. And I was so excited that I was having to make patches. And then, Katina was coming, and the lay people, they figured that they would want me to have the robe. Partially because I was new, and it's kind of tradition in Bhavana, like the newest monk gets the robe. But I was like, nah, this robe is okay. I got my patches, I'm good. And I started to realize, like, actually, I had an attachment to having a patch robe. And so I let it go. I said, you know what? These people want to give me this robe. They make it, as is tradition in the Sri Lankan and the Thais, they make the robe. Or sometimes the monks make the robe in the Thai tradition, the Thai forest tradition. But, I said, you know what? I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let it go. And I took that robe, took the new robe. So, and one of my robes faded so much that it looked pink. Ayasoma would say, you have a pink robe. And I was like, okay, sure, I have a pink robe. No problem. So I wore it until, I was basically offered another robe. Whatever it is, that's fine. No worries. Yes. Shay says, do I have a spare one when I do laundry? No. I only want to wear, this is technically an ascetic practice, but I only want the 3 robes. See, this is the thing. Most people don't realize you can use your Sangati as a robe. So when I wash this robe, when I wash my main robe, I either do it in the afternoon when I don't need to wear it, or if I need to wash it, I just wear my Sangati as my robe. No problem. You don't need more than the 3 robes. You really don't. But even in the Buddha's day, you had monks that were robe collectors, as it were. Maybe they're like, you know what? I like this color robe on this day, and that color robe on that day, and these color robes after Labor Day is no good. Whatever. That didn't last long, thankfully. There were rules put into place. That is not how this works. Buddhist monks. All right. Let's see. Okay, so let's go back to sickness. This is another one that's going to be, there's probably going to be a bazillion suttas about this, especially when we're talking the divine messengers, old age, sickness, and death. So I wouldn't be surprised if Devadutta Sutta is not the first one. There it is. Devadutta Sutta, the first one that arises, right? Very easy. But instead of that, because that's a longer one, we're going to go to delicate, which is a sutta I have spoken about many times. If you want to know, like, the origin of, like, the Buddha had 3 palaces and things like that, technically more like 3 mansions, but this sutta is one of the few suttas where the Buddha talks about his past life with those kind of details. So, a delicate lifestyle. My lifestyle was delicate, mendicants, most delicate, extremely delicate. In my father's home, lotus ponds were made just for me. In some, blue water lilies blossomed, while in others there were pink or white lotuses, just for my benefit. I only use sandalwood from Kasi. And my turbans, jackets, sarongs, and upper robes also came from Kasi. I don't know, maybe Kasi is where the, like the Milan. I don't know, you get some like fancy clothes from Italy or something. Kasi was like the Milan of northern India. I only had the best, most fancy things. And a white parasol was held over me, so an umbrella, night and day with the thought, don't get cold, heat, grass, dust, or damp, or don't let these things bother him. I had 3 stilt long houses, one for the winter, one for the summer, and one for the rainy season. I stayed in a stilt long house without coming downstairs for the 4 months of the rainy season, where I was entertained by musicians, none of them men. While the bondservants, workers, and staff in other houses are given rough gruel with pickles to eat, in my father's home they were given fine rice with meat. So it would be slaves, workers, and staff. Amid such prosperity and such a delicate lifestyle, I thought. So you have the Buddha here, kind of immersed in the highest of hedonism, but he starts to contemplate. When an unlearned or learned ordinary person who is liable to grow old, not being exempt from old age, sees someone else who is old, they're horrified, repelled, disgusted, overlooking the fact that they themselves are in the same situation. But since I too am liable to grow old, it would not be appropriate for me to be horrified, embarrassed, and disgusted when I see someone else who is old. Reflecting like this, I entirely gave up the intoxication of youth. Bhante Sudatta says vanity. And I think intoxication is better. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation of that is much better. Because intoxication is like we're drunk. We're drunk on youth. We're drunk on health. We're drunk on life. When an unlearned, ordinary person who is liable to get sick, not being exempt from sickness, sees someone else who is sick, they're horrified, repelled, and disgusted, overlooking the fact that they themselves are in the same situation. But since I too am liable to get sick, it would not be appropriate for me to be horrified, embarrassed, and disgusted when I see someone else who is sick. Reflecting this way, I entirely gave up the intoxication of health. When an unlearned, ordinary disciple who is liable to die, not being exempt from death, sees someone else who is dead, they're horrified, repelled, and disgusted, overlooking the fact that they themselves are in the same situation. But since I too am liable to die, it would not be appropriate for me to be horrified, embarrassed, and disgusted when I see someone else who is dead. Reflecting like this, I entirely gave up the vanity of life. And so what you see here also, this is kind of like the beginning of the later embellished story of the Buddha going forth. This is the origin of the story of the Buddha being kept away and the father never letting him see old age, sickness, and death, but he goes out and sees a sight, old age, sickness, and death, and then the 3 sights, and then the 4th sight being a monastic. So obviously that's apocryphal story. That's not found in the suttas, but this is the origin of that. This sutta is where you see that the Buddha was actually not kept away from these things, because nobody honestly can be kept away from them. But he had everything a person could ever want or need, but he still contemplated. He still investigated these divine messengers. These are the 3 intoxications. What 3? Intoxication with youth, health, and life. Because of these intoxications, a person does bad deeds by way of body, speech, and mind. They were born in a bad place. All right. So I think that's good enough for sickness. Disciple, yeah, you can ask another question if you like. You don't have to ask if you can ask. You just type it in the chat and I'll get to it. So whatever you want, whatever question you want to ask, just type it in the chat. I don't know if I'll do more than an hour today. I was up quite late last night because I couldn't go to sleep. So I'm working on very little sleep from last night. It's kind of an interesting thing. In my monk life, I struggle with lack of energy. But every once in a while at night, I have so much energy, I can't get to sleep until like 3 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the morning. And last night was such a night. Still haven't pinned down exactly why. It's not coffee. It's not anything like that because I don't drink that stuff unless I have nights where I'm up till 3 o'clock in the morning. This morning I had some coffee. So, but it's quite an interesting experience. Sky asks, difficulty walking. I don't know. I don't know if anything would actually come up from that. I'm trying to think of maybe a better way to put it. I mean, we can do a direct search. I don't think anything will come up. Yeah. We can look up, not Kara Sutta, Chankama Sutta. Here we go. The benefits of walking meditation. If one has difficulty walking, well, I don't know. Perhaps some kind of strength training or perhaps something kind of developing slowly. Walking is, good, even if it's slow. Mendicants, there are 5 benefits of walking meditation. What 5? You get fit for traveling, fit for striving in meditation, and healthy. What's eaten, drunk, and chewed and tasted is properly digested, and immersion gained while walking lasts long. These are the 5 benefits of walking meditation. And you have people like Bhante Gunaratana, and even my third grandfather, who are people who, my third grandfather died only like 2 years ago, and he was like 95 or 96. A couple years older than Bhante Ji, who I think is now like 96 or 97. And he was a walker his whole life. And Bhante Ji is a walker his whole life. Even now he goes for walks. He can't walk nearly what he used to. He used to do 4 miles a day when he in his 50s and 40s, 50s, etc. But, walking when you can walk, it's good. It's lots of benefits. And here's good 5 benefits. Even if it's a struggle, walk slowly and walk short distances. You don't have to go walk for a whole mile or even a quarter of a mile. Just walk. Strengthen your body. It's also help you. Older people waste away because their activity becomes so little. So having some kind of activity like walking can really help with bones and joints and all that kind of stuff. Bulging discs. Yeah. Maybe some yoga, maybe some kind of stretching and things like that. How about handicapped? Handicapped, I can, or disabled. Let's do. I suspect disabled might be easy. Might come up. Yeah. Mendicant is faithful, ethical, and gets internal security of the heart, but they don't get the higher wisdom of discernment of principles. So they're incomplete in that respect. Suppose, Nandika, there was a 4-footed animal that was lame and disabled. It would be incomplete in that respect. In the same way, a mendicant is faithful, ethical, and gets internal serenity of the heart, but they don't get the higher wisdom of discernment. All right, so that's that. I've heard it said that strong meditators don't need much sleep. You're talking like people who are like Arya Sangha, people who are like masters of the first couple jhanas. You're talking like this is a very rare person who does not need as much sleep. Yeah. This is not just somebody who's been meditating for a long time and is good at sitting and following the breath. There's some extra qualifications there. Do Buddhists believe in self-defense? Yes. Yeah, and one of the rules for the monastics is that you can give a blow with the intent of escaping. So there is some allowance even among monastics for self-defense. And you want to avoid intentionally killing. So if you want to defend yourself, that's okay. Yeah, but it's not. You have to be wary of your intentions. You have to be, very mindful and wise in how you choose to act for anything skillful to come out of it. It's not necessarily it's a nuanced situation. That's what I'll say. It's a nuanced situation. It's not necessarily black and white. But in general, yes, you can. When you're talking about individuals, Buddha doesn't have anything to say about what kingdoms should or shouldn't do, or should countries go to war and all that kind of stuff. The Buddha stayed out of that. But individuals, the Buddha wants Buddhist practitioners to develop a mind that is full of letting go, full of goodwill, and full of harmlessness, right? The desire not to harm. So somebody can be, very much trained in fighting and all these kind of things, but they can have a goodwill and they could have a desire not to harm. But if they need it, they can defend themselves. I mean, I owned firearms and I was a Buddhist. And especially in the earlier days, for a while, I was big into self-defense and home defense and things like that. Eventually, for myself, I let it go. I got to the point where if I was going to die or be attacked, I'd just let it happen. It's okay. Doesn't bother me. It's not worth me creating really bad karma for myself. When I was still kind of quasi responsible for other people, it was a different story. I felt a little different, but now I'm only responsible for myself, so I don't have to worry about such things. Bante, do you have any tips or practices for shyness? It holds me back a lot in life. Even with Dharma practice, like seeing an opportunity to practice generosity, but being too shy to do it. Well, what exactly do you mean by shy? Are you an agreeable person? Meaning like you don't like to cause any, you don't want to kind of get into any conflict, or you don't want to cause anything, you have to do anything that might be uncomfortable or anything like that. If you're a very agreeable person, which I am, that can be quite hard to do these things. For myself, life and my career taught me, ways of dealing, like, because you can't always just be that agreeable person that wants to avoid conflict. You have to, get in there sometimes. So I kind of balance that out. But, it could be part of your temperament. It could be part of your personality that you're kind of have this agreeableness. And so, you don't want to cause any trouble. You don't want to get in any conflict. You're worried about uncertainty or whatever. And also it could be that maybe you have a lack of self-confidence. That's another aspect that could be there. So you don't want to see yourself as, being foolish or doing something stupid that other people might, take offense to or laugh at you for. So in that regard, one of the things to work on is not caring as much of what people think of you. I mean, you need a certain level of that, but beyond that level, it becomes debilitating. It becomes detrimental. And really, it's more about who the important people, like the Buddha's always talking about the wise, right? So you should care about what wise people that you trust think about you. Everyone else, not so much. Not so much. So it depends on, you have to kind of look within yourself and see what the causes might be, and then the medicine to apply depends on the causes. But the medicine, at least the diagnostic tool, is always mindfulness and investigating why the shyness arises. What are the causes, conditions for the shyness that arise? Like following that experience back as far as you can to understand it as deeply as you can. Karuna says, I've picked up so many prescriptions to manage my circadian disorder. I definitely don't have a circadian disorder. I've always slept like a rock my whole life. So that's never been an issue. And even before I became a monk, I never had this, like, sometimes I can't go to bed, mostly because I exhausted myself every day. I was into doing marathons and doing all kinds of crazy exercises. Like, I put in a lot of physical work. Something of which I actually quite miss. I quite miss being able to do a lot of the physical things I used to do as a layperson. I guess mostly because it was much easier to manage, weight and things like that than doing that. As a monk, you can't do a lot of those physical things. So, yeah. But, yeah. Energy has been a theme of investigation for me since in my monastic life, which is fine. That's a good theme. It's a good thing to investigate and understand. You do yoga, Sky? Very good. Yeah, very good. Yeah, that too, but more the lacking in confidence. So, well, why do you lack confidence? Investigate that, question that, contemplate that. Why? Maybe there's something you need to do about it. Maybe there's nothing you can do about it. Either way, it can lead you to having confidence. Well, if there's nothing I can do about it, why worry about it? I'll just be confident. Um, all right. I think we're good. I don't want to do if I did the meditation, I'd fall asleep. This is why I don't want to do the meditation. So sorry if we don't do the meditation, but I think I'm going to call it for the night. So, all right, friends, thank you for coming and engaging and being part of Dhammapalooza. Suki Hotu, may you be happy and at ease. Practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again, which could be tomorrow morning for Morning Monastery Experience, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. New York time. Could be Saturday for Insight Timer session, 3 p.m. Or could be, if I'm alive, next week, next Monday, for another Dhammapalooza. So have a good week.